dialogues events going on, and dialogues is the Royal Standards new arts professional development programme that's starting today. So there's this event, this talk from Oliver, which is also involving Alex, who is one of Oliver's strong friends, and then also an art therapist who's running a bit late, so she's on the way now. Who's going to give Oliver a live assessment of the exhibition of his work in front of us today. And then also later on is Reactor having at the Big. So Reactor has been working with a group of 12 people today in a day-long workshop, and then we can go and see what they've created between 4 and 6. So after this we'll walk down the road, and then after that we go to Mellow Mellow for a bit of a discussion about today, and a bit of a feedback session after that. Watson and Creative Space got on their closing party for the fixation, which is next week they've got on, and it's going to be live music. Anyway, here's Oliver.
Hello. Hi, I'm Oliver. Thanks for coming. So I'm just going to do a little introduction to kind of a background of things that I was doing before this project started, and then I'll just talk a little bit about this project, and then Alex is going to talk about his experience in the project, or something. Alex wrote his dissertation to do with the exhibition as well, so we'll talk about that. And then when Susan gets here, we'll do some art therapy. So I was on the MFA at Glasgow School of Art, and in my final year, maybe this is a problem for lots of people, I sort of had this dilemma about whether I wanted to be the type of artist who made objects, or whether I wanted to be the type of artist who made projects. And I'm going to say that a couple of times, so it's fine, I know it kind of rhymes. And so, my problem with objects kind of comes from this Quentin Crisp quote, where he says, he's talking about night classes, and he says, well, it's okay if you're going to go to a night class if you're going to learn how to sing or dance, because people who learn how to sing, they'll always have richer, rounder voices, and people who learn how to dance will always have bigger, bold gestures. But as for pottery or basket weaving, what good are those? Because as soon as you leave the evening institution, you might get into an argument with a stranger on a street corner, and you have to say, well, I can't express myself, you'll have to see my basket. And so this seemed like a really good way to it seemed like a problem. I was thinking, yeah, I spend so much time in the studio that I never really interact with people, and so it seemed like a bit of a worry for me. So then I think, I could do projects and really get involved with people. But I suppose the other problem that came from this Quentin Crisp quote is the rise of success from Quentin Crisp is all about kind of an era that celebrated difference as sort of liberating, whereas I think that now, every time I say this bit, I feel really embarrassed, but now we've got someone like Roncière looking at how actually difference is used as a strategy to keep people in their place, because they stay aware of kind of pre-existing power structures that are already in place, So, and what he suggests, or what I sort of thought he suggested at the end of Hatred of Democracy, is indifference as a sort of political strategy. And I was already interested in kind of the politics of indifference from the writing of Moira Roth, who's a kind of 70s feminist art critic. Well, I think she's still going now. But at the time in the 70s, she wrote an essay called The Aesthetic of Indifference, where she looked at people like John Cage and Robert Reichenberg, and she sort of lamented the fact that at this really highly politicized kind of McCarthyite America, and as kind of gay men working in this kind of culture, they weren't using their platform as a protest. They were kind of, making silent music or painting white canvases. And in the 90s, Jonathan Katz is a guy who was writing his PhD, and he re-evaluated what Moira Roth said, and he looks instead and says that actually this indifference was a political strategy and kind of a non-binary type of opposition, where So he uses this kind of Derrida term instead, where he describes it as indecidability. So like there could be a project. He thinks that what they're doing is thematizing their absence and thematizing the fact that they're sort of being silenced. I suppose like we look at someone like John Cage, and one of the ways that he does this kind of thing is through negation, like and Jonathan Katz talks about it as ironic negation, which is a term that he uses taken from Ross Chambers, who's a literary theorist. So the idea that you're saying something, but by looking like you're not really saying anything. So it's a bit like holding your breath when you're a child until your parents give in, or some kind of sulky silence. And I suppose I could really identify with that through the way that when I orchestrate a project, like I often work with loads of different people, and so it's kind of like this sort of Cagean, like an allegorical composition where I don't really have final control of things, you know, like the space is designed for me by someone else, and the way that the project developed was kind of based on like just the way that the situation that I was in at the time was developing. So yeah, so I think that's the art of so John Cage kind of negates himself in that way, and I can kind of identify it also when I make objects. For a long time I was really scared of men, so it meant that when I went to art school I was always too frightened to use workshops, so I just had to find other ways of making things. So it's often about kind of handcrafting, and like my abilities sort of limited or meant that I had to make things in a certain way and really shaped the kind of evolution of the objects. And I always think about this as being about a philosophy of acceptance. Hi Susan, hello. This is Susan, she's not a therapist from University of Chester. So I was thinking about this kind of the way that I was making things either in project or in object form. The end result sort of always articulated the way it came into being, and I was thinking about this as a philosophy of acceptance, which is how Quentin Crisp talks about it. But I found out that like in critical design, the term for it is anecdotal manufacture, so like the final work sort of tells the whole story of the way that it came into being and sort of the process that was made from that. And this kind of evolutionary experience I sort of linked to a 1968 lecture by Len Lai about individual happiness. And he uses this quote from Roger Fry, which I'm going to read because I tried to explain it to Susan on the phone the other day and I felt like I didn't quite get the quote right, and I just want to make sure that it's really right. So Roger Fry said, and then I adapted, that by the way, I don't know or necessarily think that this is true because it sounds pretty wild, but that all evolutionary experience is stored in the nucleus of one cell in the body, and when art draws on this evolutionary acid, we gain an aesthetic value of happiness. And so the two things that when I first went to GESA and still now that I'm kind of interested in are these ideas of indifference and these ideas of happiness as kind of destabilizing strategies, because it seemed like making an artwork and then kind of being indifferent about it or kind of finding pleasure in what you're doing seemed to be really absent from a lot of people that were on my course and a lot of people that I knew were making things. Like it felt like you should sort of be really like, one tutor told me that the only time you knew you were doing something good was when you were really bored of it, because it was finally like becoming work. And I think like I spend so much time in my studio that I don't want to be in a situation that's a drag. Like I want to do something that's a joy. And it seemed kind of problematic to say that to people, and the more, because I'm kind of sick in the head about stuff like that, so the more that it seemed the wrong thing to do, I guess, that I just carried on trying to do it. So my 5 New Friends is like the first time, I guess, that I've had a chance to kind of try to bring together both the object side of my practice and the project side of my practice. So we worked with 5 artists to make the films. I worked with like my 5 New Friends to sort of generate the content for the project. I made the objects myself, but sort of based on the experiences that I had while I was kind of developing the project. And then finally the whole show was kind of put together by Joey and Camille from It's Our Playground, who made the exhibition design. And they also designed the website, my5newfriends.com, which has got all the diaries on it, which generate the content of the show. So if you want to see that, it's online, you can check it out. Yeah, when I said destabilizing